Today, we're going to talk about one of my favorite things, book conventions. We're going to talk about some great ones. We're going to talk about some absolute flippin' disasters. But more importantly, I'm going to tell you how I decide which conventions to attend and how I can tell that a convention is going to be an absolute debacle beforehand, and how you can avoid those. So stick around and let's talk cons and hope that they're not. Hey there. Welcome back to the channel, or welcome to the channel if it's your first time here. I'm John Hartness. I'm the founder and publisher of Falstaff Books. We're an independent press based out of Charlotte, North Carolina. And I'm also the author of over 40 science fiction and fantasy novels, including The Black Knight Chronicles, Quincy Harker Demon Hunter, Bubba the Monster Hunter, and many more. And today I want to talk about one of my favorite things in fandom. I want to talk about book conventions. I have done a great deal of my career development at science fiction and fantasy conventions, book cons, basically. But recently, the 2020s have been rough years for conventions, y'all. We've had convention runners promising things they could never in a million years provide. We've had volunteers and attendees behaving horribly toward guests and guests' spouses. We've had tons of overpromise and underdeliver. We've had convention guests and panelists and workshop leaders arriving to find out that their hotels weren't paid for, that they were supposed to be provided, and none of them had a giant floofy kitty that would make it all better, because the presence of a Gandalf would have assuaged a lot of people, wouldn't it, Furball? Sorry, I had to rearrange the furniture now that I had the cat. All right. Yeah. Okay, now we're good. We have a cat on the table. We have a camera in the right place. And I've got a whole list of notes about conventions. But first, one of the things you've got to understand is that not all conventions are created equal. There are tons of conventions that are opportunities for you to sell books, but not all of them are going to be a good fit for you, and not all of them are going to be a good fit for you at this point in your career. Now, I have done as many as 40 appearances in a calendar year, and I've gotten it down under 20 nowadays because, well, I'm old. I can't do that crap every weekend like I used to. And the convention economy has shifted in the last few years. So you got to make sure that you can stay profitable or at least break even. So how do I decide what conventions I'm going to be attending? I crack open a ginger ale, which for some reason scares the cat. I promise I've never spilled ginger ale on my cat, but man, he hears that and he's out. First off, I typically stick to the fan-run science fiction and fantasy conventions. I don't do very many of the big vendor hall cons. I don't do very many Comic Cons because I don't feel that I'm building my readership the best way at those events. I find that I am doing the best work for my career long term when I can be on panels in the front of the room being either funny or intelligent. Usually I shoot for funny because I can usually get there. And then when I'm done with a panel, I Pied Piper people back to my table and they come buy books. And once I've made a connection with a reader on a panel, I feel like my book is more likely to be read when they get home than to go on the massive TBR pile that they figure they're just going to die under someday when it falls over on top of them in their sleep. So that's why I don't do your Galaxy Cons or your Fan Expos and shows like that, because for me, I've decided that the juice isn't worth the squeeze. These shows are very expensive and they take a lot of time for limited return, in my opinion. Your mileage may vary, and if you think that doing big vendor hall cons is absolutely the way to build your brand, then go for it. I'm not going to tell you no. I'm going to tell you that's not what I have found works for me. So what I want to do is the smaller science fiction and fantasy conventions. These are usually 500 to 1,500 people in attendance, and I'm looking to make $2,000 to $3,000 over the course of the weekend, because that will cover my expenses and leave a little meat on the bone and make it worth my attendance. And I'm counting on sell-through. I have 42 books in print. So if someone falls in love with one of my books and they've got my bookmark, they're probably going to order more. It's a lot harder when you have one book out. It's a lot harder because you don't have that read through to count on. So yeah, I'm not trying to sell you one book. I'm trying to sell you everything I've ever written when I'm at a convention. And I don't care if you buy it in print or in ebook. Frankly, if you're buying it after the con, I'd rather you buy it off our Shopify on ebook, because that's all profit for me. And it saves you a little bit of money, and I don't have to go to the post office to ship them. Y'all, I'm pretty lazy. That's how I've written 40 books in 15 years, by being lazy. So that said, if a big vendor hall con wants to comp all my stuff, I'm there. If they want to comp my table and have me do a couple of panels, I'm thrilled to be there, because then I've got the best of both worlds. So, if you run a big vendor hall con and you would like for me to attend, call me, comp my table, hook me up with a hotel. I'll be happy to be there. But then, once I've found a science fiction fantasy fandom style con, and by that we're talking a Jordan Con, a Norwest Con, Oricon, Armadillo Con, Con Carolinas. We're talking that style of convention. So then I look at expected attendance and I talk to my friends who have been there. Most of the conventions I do are going to be within driving distance of Charlotte, North Carolina. And my definition of driving distance is about 6 or 7 hours. I don't want to go much further than that because I'm old and I need time to recover if I do that. And we'll address that later. So I probably know someone that's been to a convention, or I may know someone who runs it. That means that I could reach out to them and say, hey, how many people came to your con last year? Some people get real funny about those numbers and, well, we had a good year. I'm trying to decide whether I'm going to spend $1,000 to be at your event. How many people are there? Well, 400. Okay, 400 is not a lot of people, and it is not, usually it's not a convention that I'll be able to make enough money at to go to. 1,000 people is about where I want to be, because with 1,000 people at a convention, I can usually sell 100 or 150 books over the course of the weekend, and that puts me in a good place. If we're under that, then I'm going to need to know who else is there. So yeah, I talk to my friends who have attended. I talk to my friends who are running the con. And yes, this does mean that I very seldom do first-year conventions, but we'll get back to that later. Sorry, had a wild mustache hair. You ever get those? Some of you do. Once I get a sense of who's going to be there and how the attendance looks, I try to figure out where I'm going to fit in a convention's ecosystem of writers. I'm a fairly successful mid-list fantasy writer, but I'm not a big-time bestseller. I'm not a huge draw. So I need to see where I fit. Am I the most famous person there who's not a guest of honor? That's going to be challenging. Am I one of half a dozen authors at my level of success and I'm already friends with only 3 of them? That's a lot more appealing because that's allowing me to expand my network. This is something that's much easier when you're a fledgling writer, because if you've only got 1 book out and you've never done a convention, you don't know anybody. So anybody you meet is good networking. And networking is a critical part of my convention experience. So let's talk about a con I did last year and didn't do this year, and why. Capclave is a very nice convention. It's been going on for quite a few years, and it takes place every year in the DC area. It's got a strong focus on short fiction and has a pretty strong focus on New York published authors. I don't write very much short fiction and none for periodicals. I only do the occasional short story in anthologies. And I'm not a New York published author and not really looking to be. So I've never been to Capclave until last year. Well, last year, Matt Dinneman was their writer guest of honor. Matt's my friend, and I spent a year or so basically being Matt's book vendor. Worked out real well for both of us. Matt didn't have to stand at a table all day, and I got a cut of Matt's book sales, which have been pretty good this last couple of years. So Matt was their guest of honor. I immediately called up the con runner and said, hey, I want 2 tables. Yeah, why? Because I'll have Matt Dinneman's new book, and I'll have Falstaff books. Matt's books cross over well with mine. Dungeon Crawler Carl fans often enjoy my sense of humor in the Bubba the Monster Hunter books or in several other books that we've got in the Falstaff line. So I knew that once I got a pile of people there to buy Matt's books, I could add on sales of Falstaff titles to their Dungeon Crawler Carl books, which I did all weekend long. We did very well we sold out of Matt's books by the end of the day Saturday. And then we did quite well on Falstaff books because we had an anchor to draw people to our booth. And I was on quite a few panels. And that also drove people to the booth. This year, their guest of honor is Joe and Gay Haldeman. Now, Joe Haldeman's a fantastic writer, and the time I met him, he was a lovely human being, as was his wife, Gay. But I don't have a whole lot of crossover audience with Joe Haldeman. And all of his stuff is New York published, so his stuff's going to be at other booksellers. I didn't really have a hook to go to Capclave. So I looked at my sales last year, and then I took out all of the Matt Dinneman books. Okay, there's half my sale. That's half my gross number. And then I figured I'd probably see a 20 to 25% decrease in my sales because I didn't have the hook of Matt Dinneman to bring them to my table and divert their attention or upsell them onto more books. So I passed on the con this year because I felt like that's not a guest of honor that's going to help sell my books. If we had a stronger sci-fi presence in our product line, I would have looked at it a lot differently. I don't know who their guest of honor is for next year, but I'll make that evaluation once that's announced. And that's part of the process for me every year. I did PhilCon a couple years ago because Jonathan Mayberry was announced as their guest of honor. So I applied as a guest and bought 2 tables and drove to Jersey. Yeah, PhilCon's not in Philadelphia. It's in a Jersey suburb of Philadelphia. So I was up there, and Jonathan got sick and couldn't come, but I had friends there, and it was a good weekend altogether, but didn't sell very well. Haven't looked at going back because it's an 8-hour drive. If I'm driving 8 hours, I kind of need to sell some stuff to be there. I try to look at programming from years past, guests of honor past, and see if it's likely that my type of paneling and my sense of humor will be appreciated. Spoiler alert, it's not always. Not everybody wants a smart-ass redneck on their panels. If it's a highly literary focused convention where everybody's deep into examining the themes of their work, I'm probably going to give it a pass, y'all. I mean, I have an entire series that I describe as Dick Jokes and Explosions. That's Bubba the Monster Hunter, by the way, if you're into books about dick jokes and explosions. I'm not here to debate why the curtains are blue. I'm here to ask why you wasted a sentence on telling me what color the curtains were, unless the curtains are going to catch fire. So I look at whether or not I think I will be a good fit for a convention. Another thing that I want to look at is who's going to be there that I know. I talked about this a little bit, but if I'm going to go to a convention where I already know everybody, who am I networking with? If I'm going to a convention where I'm the biggest name author or publisher outside of the guests of honor, then everybody else is going to be there to network with me, which is lovely and flattering, not profitable. And conventions are a business. They're one of our strongest marketing tactics for our press. Our attendance there is getting our name in front of a lot of people, and it's getting our titles in front of a lot of people. But I'm also doing that work for me. I'm also trying to meet people who will put me in anthologies or who will contribute to an anthology for us in the future. I'm looking to find out who I can talk to when I have questions about things. And I've made these friends at conventions over the years. I've made a lot of these friends when I was way too new to know the value of these people, that these people would eventually bring to my career. I just wanted to meet cool people. And I got lucky and met a lot of cool people, and they've done a lot of great things for my career. So if I'm going to know everybody at a convention, I'm probably staying home, because unless I know I'm going to sell a whole lot of books. Because let's be real, I love hanging out with my writer friends, but a lot of them live close and we can just go to dinner. We could just get together. And then I don't spend hundreds or thousands of dollars and am away from my wife and my cats for a whole weekend. One of the things that we're doing for this is we're trying to do at least one convention a year outside of the Southeast. In 2026, we're going to do StokerCon in Pittsburgh. Now, we did StokerCon this year in a very limited fashion, but we're doing StokerCon with more people and more staff and more presence in 2026, because it will raise our profile outside of the Southeast, and it will help grow our profile in the horror community specifically. So that's a way that I can choose to attend a convention that may not have a ton of people, but it has a lot of ancillary benefits whether or not we sell very many books. Then I have to take into account time and distance. Okay, I just said we're going to StokerCon in Pittsburgh. I've driven to Pittsburgh from Charlotte. That's an all-day sucker of a drive. It's 8 or 9 hours, depending on how leaden your foot is. And I'm always trying to vend at most conventions I do, at least to some degree. That means I got to carry a lot of books, usually several hundred. And I've become very well acquainted with how many books you can fit in a Subaru Forester over the past 3 years. The answer is a lot, along with a very big hand trunk. But that means flying to a convention's really hard. If I were to go to NorwestCon, which is in Seattle, or maybe Seattle, Tacoma, somewhere in that area, I got to fly because I can't take 3 days on each end to drive catty corner across the country. And that means I'm either going to have to ship stuff ahead of time to the hotel and have them hold it for me, which typically has a cost associated with that, or I'm going to have a friend in the area who's willing to take all of this stuff for delivery and schlep it to the convention for me. That's going to need to be a really good friend, or it's going to need to be somebody I can compensate in some way. And if I'm already buying a plane ticket to fly from Charlotte to Seattle, well, that's several hundreds of dollars, and then a couple $100s in shipping, when typically I throw the stuff in the car and I drive and I spend $100 on gas round trip, 200 if I'm going to DC round trip. So that means that I need to sell significantly more books, and I can't take as many. But even with conventions that are within driving distance, I have to take a look at how much time I'm going to need to recover. I'm getting ready for Multiverse in a couple of weeks when I'm recording this. And that show takes place in Peachtree City, right outside Atlanta. I'm driving down on Thursday so that I can set up Friday morning, run the table Friday through Sunday, and then I'll drive home. So that means I have to pack the books on Wednesday, load the car Thursday, drive 5 hours to the hotel, get checked in, probably have dinner with a friend or 10, get a little sleep, set up Friday morning, do the convention for 3 days, drive 5 out, load, pack all the books that I didn't sell back up, load the car, drive 5 hours home, and then get home, unload the car, check in inventory, reorder inventory for the next event, and then get ready to do it all over again. A 3-day convention takes at least 5 days of work to do. And then it takes me a day or two to recover because, well, I ain't as young as I used to be. Getting old. And a longer, bigger show like Dragon Con, Dragon takes me the entire week after Labor Day to recover. Last year was perfect because I hadn't downloaded Baldur's Gate 3 yet. So when I came home from Dragon, that's all I did for the week. Or maybe it was the year before. Whatever year Baldur's Gate 3 released, I came home for Dragon Con, loaded that onto my PlayStation, and I didn't leave my recliner for a week except for food or bathroom breaks. And that's what I needed because Dragon Con is like nothing else. It's the hardest work week of my year and the most rewarding. But all of this is to say, I'm not really doing much in the way of back-to-back-to-back conventions anymore, unless I got a lot of help making it happen. So there could be 2 conventions that I really want to do, but if they're on adjoining weekends, I'm probably only doing one of them. And there are some red flags. And I'm not saying that people who put out their hard-earned money for conventions this year and did not get what was promised to them, I'm not saying that these people are dumb or these people should have known better. Because these people were promised something and they were not, and that was not delivered for them, and that is not their fault in any way. But here's some things that I will tell you should be red flags when you are signing up for a convention of any size. 1, has anybody done this before? Anybody involved with the event, I mean. And I don't mean did a 20-person library event. I mean, has anyone negotiated with hotels? Have they produced a convention before? Generally, you should go on an event's website and look at their About page to see how long they've been at this. I said I don't do very many first-year conventions anymore. Well, because most of the time when I'm doing a first-year con, they don't know how to bring people in the door, and that means I'm not making any money. So maybe I miss out on some things that are just incredible events. But I also miss out on some real blank shows. I'm trying to cut down on my swearing on the channel, so if I'm not really ticked off about a topic, I'm going to try and keep my language mostly G-rated. I hope y'all appreciate what a struggle that can be. And if you've ever read any of my Quincy Harker books, you certainly know what a struggle that can be. So I tend now to stick to conventions where I can look up how many people were there last year. Sure, if an experienced con runner calls me up and says, "Hey, John, I'm doing this con. It's a little thing, it's a first year thing, but we're going to have some people there and I'll take good care of you." Okay, sure. But as a rule, I'm not doing a first year event. I want somebody else to experience their growing pains. Another way that you can check the oil of an event, look at the kind of venue it's in. A Million Lives Book Festival has been called the Fire Fest of books. This was one of the biggest debacles in conventioning. And why in the world didn't you show up expecting it to be hot garbage? Because you're talking about a romance book event in the Baltimore Convention Center. Convention centers are very big places, and they are crazy expensive. How in the world are you going to put on a book event in the same style event that they do car shows in? Places where they do, I don't know if they do the Baltimore Comic-Con in the Baltimore Convention Center, but the Baltimore Comic-Con has tens of thousands of people there. Most book events take place in hotels with ballroom space because most book events only have a few hundred people showing up, maybe 1,000. This place was talking about trying to have 5,000 or 6,000 people. Really? Really? So don't do conventions in spaces that are too big for book cons. That's a red flag right there. And sometimes conventions just have marketing materials that are abject garbage or abject BS. Once Upon a Con, still on its website, calls itself the nation's first fantasy book convention. I can think of a couple hundred events that I've attended that would maybe contest that claim. It's absolutely ridiculous to say that you're the nation's first fantasy book convention. You're not even the nation's first fantasy romance book convention. You're not even the month's first fantasy book convention. So what else are they lying about? What else are they not telling you if the core statement on their website is BS? So when you're picking a convention, what are you looking for? You're looking for something that's big enough to be beneficial. You're looking for something with people that can expand your professional network. You're looking for something that's not so big you'll be overwhelmed. A lot of writers have social anxiety. A lot of writers are very introverted. We're actually going to teach a class at our Saga Genre Fiction Writing Conference. There's a link in the description. We're actually going to teach a class called Networking for Introverts. And we're going to do networking events to teach unpublished writers how to meet people the right way. Because there's a right way and a wrong way to network. And the right way is be cool and make friends with human beings. And the wrong way is to stand outside a circle of friends who are talking to one another and loom creepily until they say, "Can I help you with something?" Just a little spoiler. So you want to right size the convention. You want to target conventions where you can either make money or make connections. And you don't want to believe outlandish claims from people who've never done it before. I do the largest convention in the southeastern United States for science fiction and fantasy every year. It's Dragon Con, and I do not know how many people were there this year. I heard a rumor that the attendance cap was 80,000, but I don't know. There were tens and tens of thousands of people there. And that's a lot of con for a lot of people. So it's not going to be a good fit for a lot of folks. And it's probably not going to be the first convention you're accepted into, because they probably get a couple thousand guest applications and they could accept a few hundred. So if you're applying to be a guest, you'd better be on your game. But don't try to start at the top. Start at a little local con. I work with Con Carolinas. We're going to be celebrating our 25th year in 2026. So maybe start there. Maybe Con Carolinas usually has 12 or 1,500 people attending. Maybe start smaller. Maybe start at Congregate, which usually has 400 or 500 people attending. Maybe that's more comfortable for you. But you've got to figure out what level of crowd you're comfortable with. And maybe you don't sell at your first convention. Maybe you just go. Hell, even just go buy a badge. Wander around, go to some panels. That's what I did the first year I went to Dragon Con once I got back into writing fiction. In 2011, I went to Dragon Con and bought my badge. And I wanted to meet a publisher there, which I then have done 8 books with since. But I went to panels. I met people in the dealer room. I introduced myself around. I made friends that year that have been friends for 15 years. It was a great time. It remains a great time. I say it's the hardest work week of my year. It's also incredibly fulfilling. I get to hang out with friends I only see once a year. I mean, I got to sit and shoot the shit with Jonathan Mayberry for like 2 hours. I don't get to see Jonathan more than once every year or two. So that was fantastic. But you've got to figure out what you want out of conventions and what conventions give you the best chance of achieving those goals. And hopefully this video has given you some tools to do that. And if we have, this is my obligatory like, subscribe, ring the bell to get notified. And we also now have memberships. So if you want to support the channel directly, you can sign up to be a member and you'll get to see stuff a little early. So thanks, y'all. And I hope I'll see you at a convention sometime. Bye.